Okay, it's starting. We're starting. Everyone's filing in. I can see everybody. Yep. Keep your hands to yourself. Okay. Hi, I'm Charlie, founder here of Momentus. Welcome, everyone, for what is sure to be a magical conversation between three powerhouse women. We're so glad you're here. The chat is now open, so we'd love to hear where you're from and just see your faces in there. The Q&A box, the little feature at the bottom of your screen, is also available now. So if you have questions throughout this conversation, just use that little box at the bottom of your screen so that we don't miss your questions and thoughts. Yes, great. Georgia, Los Angeles, Pennsylvania. And then let's see what else. Yeah, so just if you have questions, make sure you use that because the chat can get lively and then it's hard to keep track. And we gotta stay on point here. Okay, without further ado, I think we should bring our guests in. Let's do that now. We've got our host and guests in the wings, ready to go. Let me just get them in here now. Here we go. Yay. Hello, Zoe.
Hello.
And Claire.
Hi.
And Jen.
Hi. I realized I had to turn it on.
Good. Perfect. I'm going to let you guys get to it because I'm very excited about this chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. I am so excited to sit across from y'all. And thank you so much for your time. I know that your book just came out and I'm sure that you guys have been on a whirlwind tour of, chatting about it and press and all the things. And I just want to say thank you so much. And I just want to introduce you really fast. Zoe Venditozzi. Did I say it right?
Oh, yeah, that's all right. I'll do.
And Claire Mitchell, who wrote this amazing, fabulous book, How to Kill a Witch. Hopefully everyone here, sorry, my camera, I can't figure it out how to make it actually zoom in, but there it is. How to Kill a Witch. I'm sorry that it's flip-flopped. I hope most of you have picked up a copy. If not, please go pick one up. Pick another one up if you have and give it to a friend. Gift it to a friend. Christmas is around the corner. Because it is a fabulous, fabulous book. And I read it probably in like 3 days. I just couldn't put it down. It was so wonderful and fabulous. And before we get into it, I was wondering, do you all want to introduce yourselves really quickly to everyone?
Sure. So my name's Zoe Venditozzi and I'm a teacher and a writer and I live in Northeast Fife in Scotland, which is about an hour north of Edinburgh. And if anybody's been to St Andrews, the home of golf, it's about a 15-minute drive from there.
And I'm Claire Mitchell. I'm a lawyer that specialises in human rights cases, and I live between Edinburgh and London, where I go up and down doing work most of the time.
I love it. So how then did you two meet? So I'm going to get right into it.
No, not at all. Well, Claire, do you want to tell the story?
Okay. Well, I had the idea for the Witches of Scotland and I didn't know how to take it forward. I had this plan of what I wanted to do and I sort of got things ready, but I didn't know how to launch it. And then fortuitously I met Zoe at a mutual friend's wedding.
Yeah, we met at a friend's wedding and we bonded over our love of true crime, and our conversation, I think, showed both of us that we've got a very similar, very dark sense of humour, but that we're also feminists and have been for quite a long time. And so Claire approached me to ask if I wanted to do a podcast with her to promote the campaign essentially, and said to me it was only going to be 6 episodes. But here we are, I think 76 episodes in, with a few recorded to go out as soon as we can actually finish them off. And it's been 5.5 years, I think. In fact, I think we've known each other maybe for 6 years, Claire, but the campaign is about 5.5 years old. I know it's like this must be some sort of campaigning equivalent of like dog years, except they're much longer.
Or you've just known each other for many, many lifetimes, and maybe
Let's go with that. Yes.
Yeah.
I've annoyed Zoe in many, many lifetimes. And I've turned up at this one.
Joy. You've brought joy and spontaneity to my many, many lives. I've corralled you in many, many lives. Attempted to.
I love it. I love it. I love friendships like that. They're so important. In the moment you just meet them, it's like you click and you're like, I know that we've spent many lifetimes together, whether that was being burned at the stake and, making sure that we're going to come back and take on the patriarchy in the next life, or, write an awesome, amazing book. Would you actually mind talking a little bit about the Witches of Scotland? Because I find it so fascinating.
Do you want to know about the actual people themselves, like the story of
No. Well,
the
yes, of
campaign.
course.
campaign?
Yeah, I'd love to know about your campaign because I just think it's such an amazing campaign.
Okay, well, I worked as a lawyer, work as a lawyer in Edinburgh, and when I do, I work in a like 17th century courtroom that's been there since that time. I dress up in 18th century men's clothes, like I put a silk gown on and a horsehair wig, and you know what, living in that world, and if you've ever visited Edinburgh, the old town, you're absolutely steeped in history. And around about the time when I was doing a lot of work in Edinburgh, I read a book called Where Are the Women by a great woman called Sarah Sheridan, and she reimagined Scotland as a place where absolutely everywhere is remembered, remembering women in the names of streets, statues, everything of that kind. And one day I was in Princes Street Gardens and I was thinking about the research that I'd done about witchcraft trials because we're not taught about it. We don't know about it in Scotland. It's a real thing now. Things have changed, but then we really hadn't talked about it at all. And I was looking around Princes Street Gardens and I thought, this is Edinburgh's main green area right in front of the castle. It is beautiful. It's got statues everywhere, but there's not one statue to a woman. If there's a statues to men who are architects and soldiers and generals and philosophers and you name it, there's a statue to a man. There's no statues to women. And I got to the top of Princes Street Gardens and I came across a full-size statue of a bear. And I was like, oh my God, there's a statue of a bear and there's no statues of women. I can't bear, no pun intended, I can't bear this. And I looked right above the bear's head. The bear's called Wojciech and he did very good things during the Second World War. And he was a present from Poland and he's very nice and that's all good. However, in a world where there are no statues of women, we need like fewer statues of bears and more statues of women. So I looked at Wojciech.
Or hear me out, just fewer statues of men,
Yeah.
more statues of women, and some flexibility on if we need more bear statues.
Are we going to get straight into the bear or the man question in the woods, Zoe?
I think we know the answer to that, Claire.
We do know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So, so we
Yeah.
Not all men, Charlie. Not all men.
hashtag, but all women. I looked above Wojciech's head and I thought, do you know what? I know that in Scotland's history, the most brutal, terrible miscarriage of justice was carried out in the name of righteousness and good in Scotland. And thousands of women were accused of witchcraft. Thousands were executed for witchcraft. And we're not taught about it. We don't speak about it. There's no memorials to them. And that's how the campaign began. I just went home and I wrote, I want a pardon for all those that were convicted. I want an apology for all those that were accused. And I want some kind of national memorial. And that was all swimming about in my head when I met Zoe.
Oh, I love it. And then in 2022,
Yeah.
the Prime Minister, is that correct? Sorry, I
Yes,
was
First
really
First Minister,
no.
so confusingly, well, maybe not confusingly because your system's super confusing too, so it's maybe
Believe me.
equivalently. So we've got the UK and we've got like our Parliament in Westminster in London, but then in Scotland we also have a First Minister and we have a Parliament in Scotland. We deal with some things in Scotland like education and things like that, but not everything. So we're still unfortunately under the yoke of Westminster. But we up in Scotland we have got a First Minister, and at the time it was Nicola Sturgeon, who had been, what was she, 8 years, 9 years, something like that, Claire? She was great. I thought she was marvelous. But she gave an apology on behalf of the Scottish Parliament on the 22nd, sorry, in 2022 on International Women's Day, and it was tied to a proposed bill about misogyny, and she really made the link that we obviously make, which is that things, you know, are not great for women. We've still not reached parity. There's still lots of misogyny, and we can trace this back forever. But particularly the witch trials in Scotland are a really big human rights miscarriage. And by the government giving an apology for that, it recognised the seriousness of it, and it helped to bring it into the public kind of consciousness to talk about it.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. I mean, when I read that about the statues in the book and that there aren't many women statues, I didn't even think about that. I think we just accept it as women that like, oh, these are statues, and we don't even realize that we're not represented. It's like, here are the war heroes, you know, here are the people in office who did blah, blah, blah. But there are women who've done those things, and there are women who equally have fought just as hard, if not harder, in other areas. And it really hit me hard of, oh my goodness, especially I have one daughter, but you know, and two boys, just it's important that they see that too.
Yeah.
So I was gobsmacked.
You know that saying, you know, you've got to see it to be it. And I think
Yeah.
it's really important that we see girls, you know, like all sorts of girls represented and women represented, so that I mean, I've got a daughter and two sons too. And once you see the lack of representation, you can't then unsee it. And
Yeah.
then you start thinking about, well, who's this building named after? Who's that street named for? You know, like why is it always men? I mean, we know why it's always men, but it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And I think it is on women like us to actually give the establishment a good kick up the backside and say, right, well, we're not putting up with this anymore.
Yeah.
We know there are women that have done loads of amazing things. Let's start seeing them in public life.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think this is the first steps, you know. I mean, maybe the next step is you're not going to be wearing 1800s men's garb, you know.
Possible. Possible.
You know, it's just so steeped in, it's so wild. So let's bring it, I want to bring it back to the book and just, you know, now establishing you two and the Witches of Scotland and your backstories. I want to begin at the beginning of this book and understand what that spark was that made you come together and want to write a sort of manual, but also, you know, a guide to, well, I guess a guide for the patriarchy in a way, and you know, to really bring light to so many who were wrongfully accused and brutally executed and tortured, and do it in such a fun and, you know, beautiful
It's
way.
weird, right? It's like somebody said that the book was horrifying and hilarious, and
Yeah.
I totally love that, because that's what Zoe and I both enjoy.
I
The
strive to be
stories.
both those things
Yeah, exactly.
minute
If
by
you had a
minute.
grave,
God.
yeah, horrifying and hilarious. But
Yeah.
so we've been doing the podcast for a few years. And we were actually approached by a publisher who said, would you like to write a book? And actually we were kind of like, yeah, we're not sure. We, like typical women, we don't know enough about the subject to write a book,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Oh my
so
God.
you're
Yeah.
like, no, I don't think we could do that. So we had a few meetings with the publisher, and he was like, look, you don't need to know it. You just need to somehow package the information that you've got into a book. And it took us forever to try and sit down and write it, because we didn't have a writing voice. We didn't know where to start. I didn't want to write a book that I wouldn't read. And I wouldn't read a book that was, I don't know, it needed to be like, the stories needed to be tangible to me, like not like an academic book, or it needed to be like my pal sitting talking to me
Mm.
and going, you'll never guess what next. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of narrative. And it very, sadly, not romantically for me and Zoe, but it took a unromantic trip to Paris, where Zoe and I just took our laptops out, went to a cafe. The rain was apocalyptic, so we couldn't move anywhere. And we just sat and drank bottles of wine and started writing
I
Yeah.
love it.
after the
That's
first
what happened.
deadline.
After
Because
what?
After the first deadline, we were
Yeah.
supposed to get it.
Stop.
Because normally, I mean, I write fiction. I write fiction normally about women that are a little bit odd or are difficult or are unlikable narrators, and that's what I really like working in. But I write a lot about like had sort of an imaginary village in Scotland, and it's really funny about how the stories about the witches completely fitted into that idea of what a village in Scotland is and about how villages function, and you know, somebody gets picked out and then people pick on them, and about how they're, you know, they're singled out and isolated. And of course the witch trials took that to the ultimate extreme, where people were picked out and they were eventually killed. And maybe eventually is the wrong word, because sometimes it's pretty swift, But the idea that you could live amongst people and know somebody and see them all the time, and be aware of them, and then go and watch them being publicly executed and accept that is really interesting to me. So that was something during the book that we were really trying to humanize all the people that were in it. So instead of just going, there were 4,000 people accused, 2,500 people executed, 85% or so of them were women. Like, they're just numbers, right? But if you start thinking about them as these were individuals, that was like Agnes Mitchell that lived down that street. That was Margaret McCarthy that lived around there.
Isabel.
Exactly. And then you start to think about, it wasn't actually that long ago. People looked the exact same. We had the same sort of fears and worries and loves and hates and angers and hopes. So it's always been really important to us that people identify the victims of the witch trials as being real people, but also, probably more importantly, the accusers and the people involved in that whole process as being people, because statistically, you'd be more likely to be, the long way relative of an accuser rather than a witch, so-called. And I just think that it's important that we keep thinking about that, particularly now in 2025, where we're told repeatedly it's this vulnerable group that are the problem. If we get rid of them, if we send them away, if we, then everything's going to be fine. And we all know that's not true. But there's still this kind of story that goes. It's important for us, good people, to understand how that works and to learn from history and to stop it happening now.
Yeah, I mean, and bravo, because that's what I found so intriguing, and it really resonated with me, was that you wrote your book in such a way that it was you could insert yourself into the story. And like you were saying, with academic books, you get a lot of facts thrown at you, and I felt like it was a way to really get to know the characters in the book and understand, digging deep into their stories, which I'm sure was incredibly hard to do without having a lot of information. And I'm sure, it was doctored information, or they were coerced, or, someone was putting words down that they didn't say. And so to really like forensically dig deep and figure out who these women were and bring us in as an audience, and then also your footnotes, which are just fabulous. They were,
We didn't get all the footnotes in.
oh no.
There were footnotes that we argued about. There was a footnote, like the American publisher was like, but this just doesn't take us any further. I was like, I do not care.
No,
We'll leave it
perfect.
in.
It's just meant to be funny. We're just doing it to be funny, or to,
We're doing it just to amuse ourselves at this point.
Yes.
If anyone else likes it, that's all good. But we enjoy it. But you're absolutely right. Zoe does the creative writing part of the book, and I
Well,
think
that's not in the American version, though. I've just been thinking about that. So the UK version has also got these extra bits in it that are fiction, where I've written from the point of view of different, like
Oh, wow.
different people, like John Knox, or like somebody that's a witch pricker, or somebody who's been accused. But our American publisher thought that might be a bit confusing in America to have the combination. But actually, as a special treat, if there's anybody here that would like those bits, I can send you a PDF of the fiction.
Please.
So I'm happy to send them out. I don't know how we'll make that work, but if I get emails, I can send them out.
I
So,
wonder if there's also an Amazon website, or I don't know, something as well that, no.
I mean,
No,
it's
you can
not
only buy the UK book.
It's either the UK version or the American version, and they're slightly different. And I can understand why there's a difference, because there's some bits that we'd have to explain because it wouldn't necessarily make immediate sense to an American audience, some stuff about Scotland. But the fiction's just, we've got a PDF where it's like a standalone.
If you give me the PDF, I can send it to everybody who got a ticket. So that's not a problem.
Thank you. That'd be good, because it really pissed me off.
Yeah, maybe it was banned. Maybe it's like another banning of books.
Yeah. But
God forbid.
I just think it's so important that we just think about them as being real people, because they were like you or me. They were like maybe a mother, maybe a woman that hadn't had children, maybe somebody who had become widowed and then didn't have a man that was sticking up for her. They were just women that might have been difficult, they might have been poor. I mean, really, what we keep saying is there are myths about how they were herbalists or they were midwives, and there were a small amount of people that did do those things. But mostly what they had in common was they were just women. They were just women going about their lives who pissed somebody off in some way.
They were just a little bit difficult and then othered. I feel like also Elise Lonan in her book, and I'm going to butcher it, but she talks about, I'm trying to honor best behavior. I think she goes into that too, about how, when this is sort of off topic, but when, like, I don't know if it was the Crusades, But when, you know, Christianity really started taking over, and they would, and I'm going to butcher this part, so forgive me. I'm going to paraphrase or I'm going to make up some stuff. But no, basically they kind of isolated the older women. And so they became isolated, and they were the wisdom keepers who were giving the younger women, you know, the heritage and that lineage and that wisdom. And they were sort of outcast as the witches and that sort of thing, kind of
Yeah.
create a barrier in between.
Have
I'm
you
reading,
seen,
sorry.
Jen, have you seen that really fascinating thing which says that there are only two mammals that go into menopause and humans are one of them? And it's theoretically, the idea is that when women get older, that what they do is they have a biological ability to stick around after that period of time to pass on information to
Mm.
the younger generation. So there's some kind of biological reason for everything that happens. And scientists think that's a biological reason for women to basically continue to be there while their children have children to
Yeah.
help pass on that knowledge.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I have friends who are starting to go through perimenopause, or friends who've gone through menopause, and one of the things that they've talked about is that that people-pleasing component
It goes.
goes away, and
Goes.
thinking like, why have I spent my whole life living within this sort of confines to like keep things in order and in check, when it's like in reality I didn't do a gut check, and now I'm finally feeling like I don't have time for this nonsense, and I don't have
Yeah.
time for this shit.
You
I that's
keep
part of
people
it, I think.
pleasing. You do keep people pleasing, but the people you keep pleasing are yourself and your
So,
friends,
yeah.
usually by sending round memes about how warm you are in perimenopause.
That is one of the best things though about the menopause is, and I don't think that this is in any way a kind of an accident, that a lot of the women that were accused were older women. You know, there's, apart from the fact that they're no longer quote unquote useful because they're not breeding, you know, they're, you know, what's the point of
What's
them?
the point? Yeah.
It's the fact that you do, and I'm sure that this has always been the case, that you reach a point where you just go, right, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
No, that's
I
it.
know.
You
And
know,
amen to that. Like, I
yeah.
mean, to have agency over yourself and be like, why have I been following these rules when I didn't like him in the first place?
Well, I think also, hopefully, as you get older, you realize when you're at capacity, and then you just kind of go, no, I can't.
Yeah.
I will kill somebody if you
Yeah.
make me do that next
Yeah.
task. So it's on you. If you want to be an accomplice to murder, I will do the task.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's where I'm at just now. But
For a
I
best
think
friend, sure.
the balancing act, though, I think, is just to not, obviously not do a murder. I am just joking.
Yeah, of course.
But also like not to be a massive like bitch, you know, and I use that word advisedly, but like to
Yeah.
not necessarily let all the thoughts come out of your face all the time.
I mean,
So
can
there's
I
a
say
fine line.
I was going to say quite a lot of time you don't let the thoughts out, Zoe, but your face is still saying it.
I know. I'm saying that expected to be hit by a bolt of lightning, that I would have the temerity to say, you know, still try and be nice.
Yeah, what's that all about, Venditozzi?
I don't know.
Annoying. Where did that come from?
So
Anyway,
oh my God.
sorry.
No, you don't. I love this so much. I love it. I love conversations, and I love learning where we're all from and what we have in common. You know, we have something in common with everybody, whether that's we breathe the air, or like, hey, we're women and we understand the struggles, and you know, the path that's been behind us, and that's in front of us. And so we can commiserate and, you know, make a pact to be better and educate and have conversations. So I love it all. Um and I love your book. I would love, I know we were talking about the kernel with this, but I also want to talk about the kernel of the first chapter, which I really love, which is I don't have it in front of me, but like believing in magic, or how to believe in
Oh,
magic.
that is my
Yeah.
like I think that's my favorite chapter, because what I found totally crazy about the idea of the witchcraft trials was that at the same time as people were getting accused of witchcraft, other people were selling spells and weren't getting accused of witchcraft.
Mm.
So the whole idea of magic being real, you could go to see a service magician that you could say, I've got this problem, and people specialized in different types of magic. People specialized in like arable magic, where they would help you with your farming, or love spells and things like that. And what the funniest thing that Zoe and I both really enjoy about this is, if you ask someone for a spell and it didn't work, there you could take them to court in Scotland in those times in the 16th century
At the exact same time.
at the exact same time. So there could be two cases on in the same day. In the morning, somebody could be taking a a magic person. We call them charmers, or the old Scot word would be chairmers. So a charmer, like a charm, like a charm
Mhm.
bracelet. So a charmer could be being brought to court, and someone could be saying to the court, I paid that charmer money and the spell didn't work. And then after that in the afternoon, somebody could be getting prosecuted for witchcraft. Like
And
it makes
did
no
anybody
sense.
ever, I mean, was there
No.
any records of someone going, these two things don't make sense?
Yeah, well,
I think
I
it's just
don't
one of those, it's one of
know.
those weird things about like your belief system. I mean, like we're the same. We have contradictory beliefs that we
Mm.
hold in the culture now, sort of thing, and I think the key thing that we need to keep talking about is that the people that were accused of being witches, that was very specifically power that was derived from the
Mm.
devil.
Mm.
So like the sort of, the witches that are working in, not the witches, the magical people that are working in the community, that was seen as being, kind of benign and helpful. And if you think about what life was like then, there weren't doctors, obviously, in the way we think of doctors. And there,
Mm.
although there was a good kind of like herbal knowledge to a certain extent, there would be certain things where, like your child wasn't getting better, or you weren't getting pregnant, or, something along those lines. And you'd think, right, well, what can I do? And then this sort of a leap of faith, essentially, to talk to a charmer who'd say, right, if you're failing to, you're conceiving, but you're losing babies, here, do this charm. And it would just be something that you would try, it makes sense to me. Or like really mundane things, like, like you lose something, like, and they say to you, right, this is the charm to say to
Fine.
find, the wee piece of jewelry you've lost or whatever. So I think it makes sense that they had these different approaches because they didn't have all the stuff that we've got now. But I mean, the idea of magic is dead interesting, isn't it? Because like, what is magic really? What's the difference between what we see as being not particularly magical, like maybe something like manifesting now,
Mm.
or lighting a candle to remember somebody? They're all within the same thing. We've all got superstitions, or most of us do,
Mhm.
about not walking under a ladder, or if you spill salt, chucking it over your shoulder, and that sort of thing. And I mean, that's magic really, isn't it, if you think about it? I mean,
Or horoscopes.
I could get into big trouble here and say that like the big established religions are basically magic.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I
Yeah.
mean, isn't that the same thing as religion
I
too?
think
Yeah.
so. I think
Yeah.
it's wishful
Belief.
thinking, wanting
Belief.
wanting them to be somebody that's going to help you, and that there's something that's going to get you through hard times, and that there's a purpose for things. And what's prayer if not a wishful thought that you're putting out, that you hope things are going to be
Manifestation.
better?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Not everybody likes that line of thought though. Some of the men that run these churches feel that that is a bit witchy.
Demonic.
It's strange. It's strange that if men do it in a formalized way, it's religion, but if women do it, it's witchcraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's just so ironic because, but it's all wiring, right? Like it's
Yeah.
all within our system. And I remember I grew up Protestant, and when I started questioning religion, I was like terrified that I would be struck down, but it's always important to question. If we can't question, then we're never going to know who we are and why we have the beliefs that we believe in anyways. But it is so strange that if you were to say like, hey, have you ever thought if the tables were turned and if, I was in your position as a woman, like, how is it any different? I'm doing the same
Yeah.
thing as priest or whatever.
It's where the power lies. And the reason that women
Yeah.
got accused of being witches in the first place was because women were seen from the time of Eve in the Bible as being the weaker sex,
Mm.
obviously, and the fact is that we're too silly to understand that the devil is trying to use us to bring down all the good and godly men in the world. I mean, that's what King James argued in his book
Right.
Demonology. And his book Demonology was the guidebook for how to find a witch, how to question her, how to, take her to court, how to kill her, how to get rid of her body. He wrote the guidebook. That's why our book's called, How to Kill a Witch. It's a
Yeah.
guidebook. So like you can see that if it's a man that tells you how to do everything, people go, yeah, of course. I mean, that makes complete sense. Yeah.
I mean, and one that was just born into something and doesn't even necessarily have any the tools to have
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just such a wild. I mean, especially as an American, we don't have, the system, our system is, don't get me started.
Yeah.
But but also, being born into something and therefore it is a divine right is also a very
Bonkers.
yeah, it feels
Yeah.
it's foreign to me, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk about King James the Sixth, right? Sixth.
Yep. Yep.
And about demonology and understanding like what was his vendetta, like what talk about if you could talk about the world I guess he was born into and why, like, did it start with his bride and the ship and the sea and all of that, or was there something in was something brewing, so to speak, during
So it started actually before his time. It started with one of our most beloved queens, certainly if you are Catholic, of Mary Queen of Scots. So she was the one who actually signed the Witchcraft Act into force. But the Witchcraft Act was signed into force by the Protestant, the Reformation Church. And while they were trying to get rid of witches weren't really the problem. They were trying to stamp out Catholic behaviour that was like witchcraft. So the Witchcraft Act says that you shouldn't commit acts of witchcraft, you shouldn't commit acts of necromancy, that necromancy is speaking to the dead, and you shouldn't commit acts of sorcery, spells. But what they were really trying to do was not really deal with witchcraft at all. That wasn't a big problem when Mary signed the Act. They were really trying to stop Catholics doing these rituals that were sort of religious and sort of otherworld, because the Catholic religion had become really mixed up with the magical world. So there was lots of stuff and lots of stories that kind of weaved their way in and out of the world of real religious history with Scottish folklore. And so it was a way of getting rid of that. It wasn't until her son James arrived on the scene that the Witchcraft Act really took over. Zoe.
I like the way you said there when he arrived on the scene. I just suddenly got a picture of him arriving on like a magic carpet. So he birthed him, and obviously during his, if you know anything about Mary, she'd had a terrible time of it, and he was taken away from her when he was little, and the way he was raised, I think, really turned his head against his mum in particular, but women in general. And
he
I think
was like 7 or something, right? When
he was much smaller than
18
that.
18 months.
Yeah, he
18
was a
months
baby.
when
Yeah,
she
and then,
was taken away.
Yeah, maybe 7 when she was killed. Maybe that's maybe what that.
No,
early...
no. He was an adult when she was killed.
Oh, right, okay.
He had the chance to save her and didn't.
Oh, now as we
wow.
keep saying, Jen, we ourselves are not historians.
No, you don't have to be.
And I think that's I'm gonna pitch this to you. That's the beauty of what we do, because we're just kind of really angry middle-aged women that are just that our minds alight
Very
on
warm.
the
Our like estrogen has dropped right down and our testosterone is firing hard.
I mean, I'm going to say to you that I've always probably had very high testosterone because I've always been chippy. If anything, I'm actually probably more mellow now. But we definitely our brains, the way our brains work is that we've landed on this story and then have gone and spoken to different experts. So in the book, we're talking to different people that actually do know about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is what the podcast is. But you can see as we're going through it, I think it's a bit like any woman, probably most women that read it are probably their brains are going to stick at the same points that our brains were, which is kind of like, well, but that's awful that James got taken away from his mum. And I'm a high school teacher, so I do trauma-informed practice. And at first, when we first started this, I was just like, James, he's a bastard. He's the one that started all this, and he was a complicated guy, and it was terrible, right? But I think that a lot of this is the way that he was brought up. I think that he was essentially kind of brainwashed and was a very clever person, and obviously wrote this book and was very clever. But I think also he had been brought up to think of women as being inferior for sure, at the very least, and actually dangerous, with what his mum was like, and that he was absolutely convinced that if there were witches there, that they were in the employ essentially of Satan, and that they were very, very much out to get him in particular. So not just kind of like a vague sort of a vibe of like, oh, the devil's going to stop you from keeping your house tidy. It was very much that the devil was going to take you over and then help you to kill the king, basically, and so that Scotland would just become this kind of awful heathen society that the devil ran. So they really did believe it. Okay, so it wasn't just convenient way of getting rid of women that they didn't like. They did genuinely believe in God, and they did genuinely believe in the devil, and the country was largely Christian. And we've got an idea now that they were pagans, the witches, and that's a very modern interpretation. So they were largely, like, overwhelmingly Christian who followed the Bible because it was so incredibly strict, and like they were completely clamped down on. They didn't really have an option. I mean, you might have to go to church 3 times on a Sunday, and the minister in your community was basically like the king in your community. So he was working for the king, who was working for God, and that he was the man that ran things in the village. And he had these people, these men, not people, men, that worked for him, and they would come to him and say, oh, this person is a bit of a concern. So, you know, Agnes, for example, she's a problem, you know, in the community. She
And they
keeps
accused women
arguing.
of gossip, and it was just a gossip
Yeah,
circle of men.
yeah, yeah, it really was. And they were under a bit of pressure. We've spoken to some historians that said to us that the elders, that was the 12 men that worked with the minister in the village or the town, and whatever the church was, they were under a bit of pressure to keep their eyes open, so to speak, for troublemakers.
Right.
So I think if you didn't ever bring a story of a witch, people would be kind of questioning, well, are you doing your job properly? Because there are definitely witches around. So if you're not ever seeing any witches, maybe you're working with the devil. So there was a really kind of creepy sub-story of
Here.
you had to accuse before you were accused as well.
It's so wild because in some ways they could have just said, "Oh my gosh, how wonderful! Like we're doing things the right way. We're good Christians, and there are no witches. Like I got nothing to
Yeah.
report."
Yeah,
But also,
yeah.
Can I explain one of the craziest things, right? James, we were talking about after he couldn't bring his wife over to Scotland because of terrible weather, blamed witchcraft for it because his reasoning was that he'd heard about witchcraft as a child. He then got taught, it was then sort of all the rage in Denmark. And when he was over there talking about it, he then tried to come back from Denmark with his new wife, and the weather was horrific. And he suddenly thought, wait a minute, the devil is sending out weather witches, which could cause us almost to die, to stop me having a family, to stop the Stuart line continuing to keep Scotland safe. So he became convinced that weather witches, and he started the first big witchcraft accusation. And there are 2 documents, which one was written about the first big witchcraft accusation, the North Berwick witch trials, called News from Scotland. And
right.
that's a contemporary document that we see in the book that tells you all about the witchcraft accusations. But the other thing that he did was write the book Demonology, How to Kill a Witch, the original. Sadly, ours is perhaps less best-selling than his, because his was a bestseller for 100 years. But
Yeah, he's got hundreds of years on y'all.
I
So
know. In fairness to us, though, there were only like 5 or 10 other books at the time, and one of them was his King James Bible.
yeah,
So
exactly.
but in demonology, he tells you about all of the different things that you can do to find a witch. But one thing that really unlocked the idea of why people accepted witchcraft for me, I found in that, and we write about it in the book, which is that God is omnipotent, right? He is all powerful. Therefore, whatever the devil does, he does with the knowledge and God allowing it to happen. So you think to yourself, well, why would God allow the devil to get witches and do bad work in society if he could just stop it?
Right.
And the answer is that God wants to weed out the ungodly. So he wants to find people that will fall for the devil's charms, and then he knows how to weed out the bad people. So the theory went that if someone was accused of witchcraft that wasn't actually a witch, God would intervene and stop it. So the more people found witches and the more God wasn't intervening, and the more they tortured them, and after torture they confessed, people were just like, well, if they weren't a witch, God would have intervened. So
I mean,
that's why people would allow their neighbor or to be accused.
but how many times did someone miraculously just rise up and be healed?
Exactly. Become we Zoe and I said quite a lot, why, if people could change into like animals, like a bird or something like that, why
Yeah,
when they're
why
accused of
couldn't they?
witchcraft, couldn't they just go, see ya, I'm
Yeah.
off, I'm going to turn to bird? And the answer is, as soon as you accuse a real witch, their power is lost.
Oh, that's
There's an
convenient.
answer for
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Don't you worry,
yeah.
they've thought it through.
And sometimes people would be accused and they weren't found guilty, so then they'd be released. But then the same people might be accused again some time later, and then they'd be found guilty. Because I think once somebody had been accused of being a witch, that kind of stigma and that sort of it's like a shadow, isn't it? Would follow them everywhere,
Yep.
and people are like, well, they weren't found guilty, but I
But
mean,
still,
and
there's a
then
reputation.
exactly, and people are then looking for evidence. So if somebody falls ill in their neighborhood, or
It's
if
their
they're
fault.
exactly something befalls a neighbor, then they're like, well, it's because we didn't kill them when we had the chance, and then they would be brought back in and they'd be accused again
It's
and
so
then found
wild.
guilty.
I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, just to go back a little bit, but this is why I love your book so much, because I mean, like what you're saying, like having a sort of angle with King James, and like he fucked this up. What an ass! Like he's responsible for this insane movement of mass murder, but yet there's a part of me that has empathy for him, because I
He thought he
can't
was doing good.
imagine. Yeah, so I really appreciate seeing it through that lens, because it's almost like he's got a vendetta from this open wound that he has, vendetta
Yeah.
for his mother and women,
And he chilled
because he
out a
was
bit.
abandoned.
Exactly. And is he, hurt people hurt people. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the long and short of it. But as he got older, he chilled out about it. I mean, he didn't turn around and then go, oh my God, guys, I was wrong. No such thing as
Yeah.
witches. But he did calm down a bit. And there are cases where he intervened when he ended up being like the King of England as well. So he's James VI of Scotland and he's James I of England, right? So he's different numbers in different countries. So when he took over in England, there was less, and in fact, Scotland executed far more people as witches than England did. In fact, there was 1 year, wasn't there, Claire, where Scotland killed more than the English did over their entire witch trial.
Oh, hundreds of years. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So there were
It's
far
crazy.
less cases in England, and it's partly because they had a different setup in lots of ways. We're together in the United Kingdom these days, but we're still quite different in different ways. We've got a different legal system, and we've got a different education system. Our folklore and our mythology is a little bit different. There's stuff in common, but we're definitely different. And I think when he moved down to deal with England as well, I think that the focus sort of drew away a bit because there wasn't as much of a witch problem. And
Mm.
he's been sort of painted as he became civilized when he moved to
That's
I think
hilarious.
that's so funny. He became civilized and moved to England because we are all such wild lunatics in Scotland that of course we had witches. And he
Oh,
moved to England and there were far less witches because people were actually civilized and decent human beings,
oh
which I
my
think is an
gosh.
idea that still carries on, not necessarily about witches, but definitely that we're wilder in Scotland than the English are. But
Oh,
it's interesting. And he then intervened in some
I
cases in
mean,
England
we
and said,
are
no, they're not
wilder.
witches. We are wild.
Sorry.
I've only been to Scotland once. I think it was about 2 years ago. My husband and I were there for like a Comic-Con in Edinburgh. I'd
Right.
never been, and I will say, it is magical.
Yeah,
Magical. I
it
mean,
It's
is.
beautiful.
first of all, it's stunning, but also, my husband was on a TV show called Supernatural where he
We know,
hunted.
we're aware. Yes.
Okay, and I was a demon that he killed on the show, and that was just
I
how
mean,
we
how
met.
does that work in a marriage? I mean, I don't want to get too deep, but like, where do
I
you go
think that's
from
a
with that
lovely, that's
psychologically?
much better than
How
our
does
we
it
just
work?
met at a wedding story.
A
Yeah, I
lot
know
of
it's much
therapy,
better.
a lot of therapy. Yeah, we're working right now on a few projects, and we're constantly like,
Who
do we
kills
bring this up
who
with our
in this
therapist? Yeah,
situation?
yeah, exactly. And
I
I'm about,
think, witch finder and witch, you could swap gender roles with that.
Oh my God.
could be a witch picker.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There was a woman witch pricker. There
Yes,
was,
I saw, but she
yeah,
disguised herself as a man, though.
masqueraded as a man in
I
order
mean,
to make money. You
I
could, you
have
get it.
respect, and also I'm horrified that she would turn on her fellow
Yes,
women
I
too.
know.
You
yeah.
know?
But we
I
do
know.
see it was a Black American woman gave me this like this name, and it was like an interaction in Twitter, and then I never caught her name because we didn't follow each other. So if this woman ever hears, please get in touch with me because I use this phrase all the time. She called them patriarchy patrollers, and that's
Ah,
women that enforce the bad stuff in patriarchy because it suits them and it shores up their power, and they're actually sometimes worse than men will be because they're trying to show. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen that happen in politics
are
where
you kidding?
a whole bunch of blonde women
I can't.
suddenly all
Yeah.
start to look very like each other,
Mhm.
and they're all
Yes.
paying court to a guy who thinks he's a king, maybe. Like you do.
I don't know
know.
where you're getting this.
I don't know. It's like I
So
said, I
strange.
write fiction. I write fiction. But
I wish
but
it was fiction.
yeah, I know. But you do see it though, and you can see that that is what happens is that some women will throw other women under the bus because they think that's how I'm going to stay safe. Whereas
Yeah.
actually, we need to all gang up together and go, right,
Yeah.
we're dismantling this. It's shit, and it doesn't serve anybody except the extremely rich men, basically.
Yeah, we have to team up and not turn on each other and start
Exactly.
fire squad
Yeah.
at our own. I
Yeah.
know.
And also,
Sorry, I distracted you. You were
No.
saying that Edinburgh was really magical.
Oh, well, I
And
was gonna say, I will say, I don't want to speak for my husband, but I'm going to. He had
Oh, go on.
never seen a ghost ever. We had 2 ghost experiences in Edinburgh. We had one the first night in our hotel room. We stayed at this beautiful old train station that was across from an old graveyard. And what?
So it was, did you stay across from Greyfriars Bobby? The Greyfriars churchyard.
There was an old, you could see all the graves. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, this is like, wow, this is, I'm sure to y'all, it's probably like, oh, yeah. There's a graveyard there and a church there. But to us, we have no history and we don't
Yeah.
have, any reverence whatsoever. And I just thought it was so cool. Well, in the middle of the night, it was pouring because it's Edinburgh
Yeah.
and there was rain. And we kept hearing this rain, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And both of us were a little jet lagged, but we're like, what is that noise? And my husband, Jared, goes into the bathroom and there's water pouring through the light. Like there's just water everywhere. And he calls down and he said, I'm so concerned there's water pouring in. I'm scared for the room above us. Like, I hope someone's not in the bathtub or, what's going on. And I think the guy like said that, oh, well, it's raining outside. And in our minds, we're like, it rains here all the time. So I don't.
Yeah.
It's raining outside, so
We don't
electricity and
routinely,
rain.
It was
we don't
Not
routinely have water pouring through our lights when
Right.
it
We
I mean,
rains.
told you we were wild.
Yeah.
Well, and I loved it. So I felt like it was it was not harmful, dangerous, scary. It was like, why? It was just like buzzing. And so this water is pouring down and we're looking at the water and Jared just goes, and the guy did call, sorry, the concierge or whoever downstairs called up and he said, no one is there's no room above you. Everyone's fine. We went and looked just to make sure. We don't see any leaks. And so we just put a bucket down and a bunch of towels. And Jared goes, okay, whoever's here, we see you, acknowledge you. Thank you so much for being here, but we really need a good night's rest tonight. So can you please let us sleep? So we go back to bed, the water stops, and in the morning, all the towels are dry. Like the floor is dry. It was so crazy.
Weird.
It's so strange. And then we did a tour. I love historical tours. Like, I'm just a junkie. Like, I lived in New York forever and I would give myself historical tours of New York. And I just love it so much. I love thinking that people walk these paths and live
Exactly.
these
We do.
That's
We talk about
exactly
that all
my
the time.
thinking.
Oh my
That's
God.
exactly my
Talk about it.
thinking, Jen. That's what I love. I love walking through an old place and going, like, who walked along here and what
Yes.
were their shoes like? What noise did their shoes make on this ground? And
And what were they
do with a
feeling?
big
Were they going through a
dirt and-
breakup or what? Where were they in
Yeah.
their lives? I love it so much. So we went to the closes. Is that what they're called?
Yep. Venels.
Oh,
I've got a flat down one of the closest.
Did you go
yeah.
underground?
yes, it was amazing.
Yeah. Mary
we-
King's
Mary King's
Close.
Close.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It was so fabulous. And I'm sure it's very touristy, but we go down and
Oh.
it's like being in.
It's really scary.
It's a
It's-
proper bricked up.
Yeah.
They just bricked. They just
Crazy.
let people go down there. So it's on the Royal Mile. Underneath the Royal
Yeah.
Mile is a whole other city that
Oh,
they just bricked off
the
with
people lived
people in
in.
it. with people in it. They just bricked them up because they were scared of the plague. My flat,
Yes.
I've got a flat on the other side of the road downstairs, and so the catacombs and everything are all under there. There's like catacombs and the hive, you know the hive, Zoe? Which
Uh,
all the places that you can go underneath it, no?
oh no, I don't know that.
The bars.
Okay,
the-
next time I come, we're going there.
We need
Yeah,
to do, come on, let's
absolutely.
do a trip.
I would
Absolutely.
love it.
But yeah, it's kind of amazing. And did you see a ghost there? I mean, if you're going to see a ghost,
We
that's
did. We were kind of hoping, but then we're like, we'll never see one. But Jared, we were walking down the stairs, and I'm not paying attention. I'm just walking along as I do, and then all of a sudden he goes, "Oh, sorry, excuse me." And I look around, and I'm like, "Who are you talking to?" And he goes, "That man, the man." And he goes, "There's no one there." Like he saw a man rushing towards him, not in a mean way, but just in a hurry. He said he was just
Yeah.
in a hurry to go up the stairs, and brushed by him, so he had to get out of the way. But he's like, I saw this person that only
Oh
he
my
saw.
God.
I
was-
had
I've been
mostly
I've been there
experienced.
twice. The
Yeah.
first time I went, I had like a real feeling of something. Like I didn't see anything, but I had a real kind of hairs in the back of my neck and
Happiness.
stuff. And the second time I went, it was just completely fine and normal. But there was definitely something extremely weird the first time I went there.
Yeah, it's wild. And then just up the street is that I don't know if they have. I don't know if there's a statue, but maybe just a marker where the witches.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
which
the
as well.
witch as well.
Oh.
Yeah, which is rubbish. It's really mealy mouthed. It's like it says that some of the witches use their power for good and some for bad. And the point
Yes.
we make is that they weren't
They're
bloody
not witches.
They were just women that got
Human
accused and then
beings.
they got killed.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
it's
they weren't
very
even
implicated.
the magic women. You know, there were people out and about going, "I've got magic and I can do magic and stuff like that." They were just folk who got picked on for being out late at night or being too good at helping people get well
Yeah.
again after they've
Yeah.
been sick, or
Or they were just weird. You know,
Yeah.
we've got a friend who's done all this research in the area that she lives in. So Judith Langland Scott, who's a historian, and she's discovered where she comes from. It was a bunch of people that were just drunks, that were really annoying and would just keep
Right.
people awake at night, and that they got accused basically as a kind of an antisocial thing. And they did believe that they were, you know, that it was the devil was making
because the
them
devil would
disrupt
have them
everybody's
up
sleep.
carousing at night,
Yeah.
right? Because godly people wouldn't.
But
So it's the devil that has them out dancing and
and they
drinking.
all got executed
Yes,
for
I'm in
that.
trouble.
I know.
Oh my God. Okay, I know that I'm taking up all your time. I have like a million more questions, so I'm gonna ask one or two more, because I know that a lot of our readers or your readers have questions as well. I want to know, what do I want to know? I want to know is there a particular, and this is probably gonna be hard, but was there a particular witch that really stood out or struck a chord or a nerve with y'all that you were like, oh, I really resonated with her and it's important to me to honor her name?
I think we often talk about Lilia Sadie, don't we, Claire?
Mm.
Who
Yeah, although I'm
was
going to talk about Isabel Gowdy.
yeah,
Oh,
so I'll
yeah.
just briefly with Lilia, she was an old lady. She didn't have any family. She didn't have a husband. She lived on the outskirts of the village because her so they didn't when they killed witches, they burned their bodies because they thought they could be reanimated by the devil. So they didn't bury witches in Scotland. But there's this one woman, Lilia Sadie, in Fife, which is near Edinburgh, who was taken in and accused, and she confessed, probably under some form of torture. And so they couldn't, and then she died before they could actually kill her. So the problem was that because they hadn't executed her, they then couldn't destroy her body because that wasn't the way it was done. So they buried her body in the shoreline, just off
So
the.
she wouldn't be a zombie, right? Or
Yeah,
come back?
exactly.
You
'cause the
wouldn't
devil-
revenant.
So
Yeah.
in Scottish folklore, the devil can't cross running water. So they buried her out there so that the devil couldn't make her come back up on land again.
Actually, that's why you were safe when the event happened with you and you didn't feel spooky, Jen, because the devil wouldn't have been there because he wouldn't have crossed running water.
Oh.
I'm not sure. I think it's more like running water like rivers rather than running out of the ceiling water. I think.
Well, it was a
It's still
river
water
coming
that
down
can't
from
cross.
the
I don't want to be a supernatural pedant, but I don't think that's the same.
I'll
But
have
anyway,
to consult the.
yeah. Her
Yeah, have
her
to
grave
swap the runes.
her grave was robbed, basically, and long story short, they took her skull and some of her bones, which end up being photographed. And then many years later, they were then there was a forensic artist who was able to give an artist's impression of what Lilius looked like. And the reason that sticks in my mind is because we've got a good idea of what Lilius was like as a person. It just makes it even more like, but that was Lilius that you knew, and then she died, and you didn't care because you thought, well, she's a witch and she deserves it. So for me, that really rings a bell that she was an unprotected older lady who was just probably minding her own business in a way that the village just weren't really down with. And that
Taking
makes
care
me
of her.
very sad. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, did they ever find her skull?
So no, the
Still
skull is
not.
still missing. So I suspect what's happened is that her skull is in some collector's private collection,
Right.
and we'll never see it again. You know, there's always a kind of a trade. You'll know this from the work that you've done. There's souvenirs. People want weird and strange and supernatural items that they will pay good money for, and we'll probably never see it again, I reckon.
Yeah, how sad. What and
Yeah.
a wild thing, which just brings me, and this is my last question, which sort of brings me to that sort of, gawking at, mass grave sites essentially, like making it for lack of a better word, like the vacationization of,
Yeah,
like
dark
Salem.
tourism. Yeah.
Mhm.
Dark tourism, yeah. Like what is that and what do you think that's about? I mean, that it's almost as if they're fictional characters.
It goes back to what Claire and I were talking about the very first time we met, which is, true crime podcast, which are essentially women being murdered in horrible ways. Why are we drawn to things like that? And I
Mm,
think it's partly because you sort of think, well, it's not happened to me if it's happened to them. And there's something in our human nature that are kind of like, we're fearful that something terrible is going to
protective.
happen to us. And we like to have a story. And we're also, sad to say, we're entertained by horrible things. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had up until very recently public executions. People went as a fun day out. There's
No.
stories of them in Edinburgh, not necessarily just witches, but like when Birkenhead, the body snatchers, whichever one it was that got executed, we can never remember which one it was got away with it and which one got killed. But the one that got executed, people went to that and there was souvenirs the day. People were standing eating meat pies, like they thought it was
Wild.
like a great day out. And I think that's because humans have got a side to them that enjoys really dark things. I don't know.
Good.
It's not very nice, but I think it's true.
Yeah, I guess
It's
so.
also, it's not just dark though. People since the beginning of time have been attracted to the other world, something different,
Mm,
superstition. Humans have a feeling inside them that there must be something else. That's why
Mhm.
we have religion. I th
mm,
that there's people want to put faith in something, whatever their God or choice may
Mhm.
be. So I think it's intrinsic to us to be drawn to that. There must be something else, and if there is something else, how do we get in contact with it, or how do they get in contact with us, or how do we live simultaneously with heaven or hell or those sorts of things? And I think
yeah.
it's just fascinating. It fascinates me. It's done so since I was a kid.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, in Edinburgh when I went and saw the witch as well, and also as a kid, I was obsessed with Salem witch trials. I grew up in Idaho, which is on the west side of America, and I actually did a paper on ergot, which
Oh yes.
on
Yeah.
the fungus that
Uh-huh.
potentially could cause the hallucinations and stuff when I was about 16. And I just remember like thinking I guess putting myself in their shoes, less of a
I think the ergot theory has been pretty discounted now
mm,
because I think that's it's something that the ergot one makes a lot of sense if you want to make them good people and it's not really their fault and for them not to be held accountable for what happened because then
yeah,
they were drugged, they didn't know what was happening, it was
yeah,
hysteria. But it's really really awful, and it's like the sort of the banality of evil, which is that actually they were of sound minds and that it was a belief system and it was kind of a power struggle, and it was just something where people just, instead of somebody going, oh guys, this is insane, it was only when the local, I don't know if he
Mayor.
was it the mayor, so it was the local, the guy that was in charge of something, his wife got accused, and then he
right. And
went,
then he
well,
finally
she's
went,
not a witch, this is
yeah,
all nonsense. And that's
yeah,
the end of it, is when somebody powerful's life is touched by it that things end. So, which I just think is really, really sad. But it's an ongoing story, you know, like we don't really change. But I think our whole thing is that if you understand your history, you can change now. You can be better now.
Mm. And is that
You're-
part of what you're hoping with How to Kill a Witch?
We made How to Kill a Witch as part of the third reason, which is the memorialisation of the women that were executed as witchcraft, because we weren't taught about it. So we wanted people in Scotland to know about it, and they certainly do now. We were very kindly credited with starting they described it as starting a cultural conversation about what it is to be a woman in Scotland's history and what it is to be a woman now. And although we haven't got our national memorial, we got our apology on International Women's Day. The pardon is still ongoing through our legislature. We, after months and years perhaps of trying to get a statue and worrying about where it would be and who would make it and what size it would be and how we would get the money for it, we came upon a very, very different idea, which is to memorialise the women that were executed as witches in our own tartan, to design a tartan.
Yes, that's right.
And we designed that tartan with a woman called Claire at Prickly Thistle, who brought back weaving to the Highlands of Scotland. There had been no weaving in the Highlands of Scotland. You're more likely to get a tartan scarf calling itself a Highland scarf from like China or India than you were from the Highlands of Scotland, despite it being our national dress. So she set up a women-run, women-owned mill, and she sat with us and we collaborated on what the tartan would be like, what the colours would be, what the thread counts would be, what it would all mean, and it's gone absolutely crazy, and it's worldwide. And I don't know if you've looked underneath the cover of your book, but if you look underneath the cover of your book, you'll be able to see something.
Oh, is this it?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh my
That's
God, that's amazing.
That's the pattern. This is the actual
it's
tartan
beautiful.
here, but that's the pattern you've got there.
Yeah.
I love
So
this.
it's all symbolic. The pink symbolizes the fact that the legal tapes, everything was tied up in red tape, like literally, meaning that this was all done with the sanction of the state and the
state.
church. It
Yeah.
wasn't people going wild and just doing it themselves in communities. This was part of the absolute thinking. It was part of the law, you know, and we know that laws sometimes need to change because they're not fair, you know, and that's why we all have to be democratically involved in who gets to make laws. But like the black demonstrates, you know, it's like an idea about the dark times, and the grey is to symbolize their ashes. And there's different things with the thread count and stuff like that that's all symbolic. But it's only, we're very, very strict and controlling about it. So it's only made in that mill. It's only us that does it directly. And that's so we can protect the women's work that's being done, so that it's done, it's like a zero waste thing, and it's all pre-ordered so that there's no waste and it's sustainable. And we're very, very invested emotionally in the fact that it's made in the Highlands by these people. So don't buy any of the knockoffs. There are things like toilet brush
There's loads of
holders
fakes. Yeah.
and like mouse mats and like a tiny little booty shorts made out of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, don't buy those.
Yeah,
so
probably
where
not.
can we buy this tartan?
Just from witchesofscotland.com.
Okay.
Yeah, literally only from us. I had a poor lady get in touch today and say to me, oh, I bought a handbag. And I said, we don't do handbags. I think maybe you've bought a counterfeit one.
Shoot.
So yeah, it's a shame because the quality is just not as good, and it's beautiful. And, you know, we can then use the money to an extent to do philanthropic things, like we've funded a couple of like awards for law students for human rights, and given money to places where there are witch trials happening right now to try and help end that in some countries. So yeah,
that's incredible. Thank you so much. And I have a million more questions. And do you have time to answer maybe like 2 guest questions?
yeah,
Sure.
All right. There's so many things I wanted to get into. I could talk to y'all all day. Okay. Has there ever been a book done on the accusers of the alleged witches?
Not, they're sometimes talked about by historians, aren't they, Claire?
Yeah.
But there's less information, because if you think about how scant the information is on those that were accused, there's even less on the people that accused them, because often it would be, like you were saying before, essentially kind of gossip within the community. But we've got, you know, I suppose there's some accounts, aren't there, Claire, of like legal arguments and things like that.
Yeah, there are some legal documents that talk about the accusers, but very, very few. Um, the problem is that in Scotland, our paperwork was so poor at the time, and so few people were literate that people weren't writing down their own histories, and the state wasn't recording the histories of people. For example, on some reports, and this is why we can say that there was about 4,000, but there was probably a lot more accusations. In some reports, they don't have the names of anybody, and they just say on a date, on this date, sundry witches were executed. Now,
Yeah.
what sundry? Was it one? Was it five? Who were their accusers? Nobody knows. What were they accused of? No one knows. So that's why, unfortunately, it's so bad. So um, we don't have any real hope of being able to make that investigation. I mean, actually, we did a event called I Write in Glasgow the other night, and one of our best journalists was interviewing us, and Danny Gariavelli, and she says that she would like to write a story from the perspective of Christian Shaw, who was the young girl who started the Paisley witch trials, one of the last ones, and she made accusations against people who were executed, about 20 of them, and she was caught pulling threads and feathers from her mouth as part of the sort of possession that she had. And then it was found there was a wee hole at the side of the wall where she was being passed this and stuff. Yet still people believed it, her accusations, and she was
I think
executed.
it's one thing, Claire, and I've talked about maybe writing another book, which would be looking at maybe some more confessions in more depth, and then maybe a bit more fiction about, you know, maybe things like how stuff works in communities, and maybe looking at accusers and what's the psychology of that situation. Like, at what point do you lose sight of the fact that this is a person and start to think of them as not a person?
Can I, sorry, see, someone just interrupted to say scarves are sold out on the site. They are. Right after this, we are meeting with our manufacturer online in Scotland.
Oh, amazing.
And we're getting our new ones made up. We have to pre-order them in batches because she literally gets the orders and then hand makes each one of them on the loom. So they take up to
Wow.
6 months to do. But it's the old-fashioned way. It's the way that women were accused of witchcraft, the clothes that they would have worn. So we just say bear with us. So we are getting new numbers from her later tonight, and hopefully by the weekend there will be more on stock that you can pre-order. So
But
just
they sell out so quickly. It's like,
yeah,
it's so
it's crazy.
amazing to us that there's such huge uptake, because it means that the story of these people, largely women, are getting known and they're getting told, and that they're getting a memorial in that form, which means that they're, you know, people are thinking about who they were and what their names were, and, you know, what was that kind of happened to them to make this awful snowball of tragedy just get bigger and bigger. So it's really, really satisfying for us to see that this initial idea we had is now something where we know that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that know about it now that didn't know about it before, which is a lovely thing, a lovely memorial, because they're in
Yeah.
people's minds now.
Yeah, and the names are living on through that, which is amazing, and giving back in such a beautiful way. Okay, I'll do one more, which I think is a great one from Jackie. She says, how did you divide this work of such an in-depth book with two authors, but pull it together so seamlessly to make it have one voice?
We divvied it up into the bits we were interested in particularly. So Claire obviously did the legal stuff. I mean, that was a no-brainer because I don't know anything about it other than what I used to see on LA Law, and that doesn't really have a relevance in Scottish witch trials. But she wrote the legal stuff. I wrote more of the modern stuff. But then we'd swap chapters and then say, what about this? Let's add that in, or, you know, could tighten it up. And then so we both had eyes on each chapter, but one of us would write the body of the chapter and then we would work on it together. I wrote the fictional bits, and I also wrote the bits that were, you know, telling the story of, like, say, like Euphemie Mackleslane. So like those bits that were the biographical detail. But we also worked with an editor who had a look at it afterwards and was kind of like, well, where did you get this fact from? And the two of us were like, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Somebody told us it at some
Our
point, so we had to
podcast, would
get,
that
yeah.
count? Is that?
I had to get fact checked just to make sure, because again, not historians. So we did have somebody as well that had an eye in it overall, because when you're writing something yourself, it's quite hard to have a bit of distance with it. And particularly when it's two people, it is a bit tricky. And that's why it took us so long to settle down to write it more than anything else. It was finding a kind of a cohesive voice with the two of us.
Jen, do you write?
I'd like to. I was an English major. I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
on my to-do list.
Do you know what's a
Okay.
really great book for starting off writing? There's a book called Bird by Bird.
Yes, Anne Lamott.
Anne Lamott, yeah. That I'd always wanted to write, but didn't actually start writing until I was like maybe in my 20s. And I did English at university as well, but didn't really write properly. And there was just one thing in hers, which I think I teach creative writing a lot, which I think is the best thing, which is the shitty first draft, where you just give yourself permission to write absolute rubbish, because you've got something on the page, you can fix it. If you don't actually write anything down, you've nothing
You'll
to
never
write.
do it.
And we
Yeah.
took that approach with our book, I think it's fair to say.
And
Claire.
lots of
Lots
wine.
of other things.
Wine, yes, I love it. Well, I'll meet
I
you all in
think,
Paris
Jen,
or Edinburgh.
take yourself away to Paris, Jen, for the
I
weekend.
will.
Just yourself.
I think so.
We'll join
Yeah.
you on day 2 and give you
I would love it.
paracetamol and
Oh.
water.
I'm there. I would love that. Watch out what you put out there.
Oh, Charlie said a business write-off. That is true.
Yeah,
That's
it
true.
is.
That's very true.
Yeah.
He knows, because I'm always like, it's a write-off, right? It's a
It's
write-off.
R&D. Yeah.
She's like the Wesley Snipes. She's like, "Oh, that's a write-off." I was like, "That's a candy bar I'm buying. I don't know what you're talking about."
I know, but I'm like, it's a work trip.
It's a work trip. Yeah, you're right. Also, are you guys going to be carrying booty shorts maybe next, so that I can buy a
Yes.
pair of booty shorts for
Yes,
myself?
Charlie.
Charlie, I think if you were to send us some images of, so we know what we're working with. It's another privilege of being menopausal. You can make jokes like that.
Just, yeah,
Yeah.
you got to really take down
Yeah.
the patriarchy with some booty shorts.
I fucking love it. I gotta get one though for my daughter. She's a witch. She thinks she's a witch, and I
Cool.
love
Nice.
it. And we
Modern
encourage
day witches we love. We love modern day
Yeah.
witches because they love us and they get us and they
And they-
understand that what we were doing is saying these people were just people who got caught up in a terrible situation when the state and the law get together and they say these are the people that are causing the problem. See, when we get rid of these people, then everything's going to be okay with the world.
Yeah,
And modern day witches, they get that. They resonate with that. They understand it.
the non-conformists,
Yeah,
Mhm.
the trailblazers.
exactly.
Yeah.
As we like to think.
I love it.
Thank you all. This has been such a great
I'm so
conversation. And
grateful.
yes,
Oh,
people
thank you.
want to rewatch this. That will be available for rewatch, so people can get. There's so
Can
much
I-
good information. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing, and this is extremely un-Scottish of me, so I'm super uncomfortable having to say this, okay? So just bear
Oh,
with,
I know
okay?
what you're
Okay.
We're up for an award with
Yes.
good
Oh,
beats,
yes.
right? But people
Charlie's
have
on
to vote for it.
I
And
have
as
the
a
link.
Scottish person, that's mortifying for me to have to ask
Why?
people to, we're just very, very bad at things like that. So in Scotland,
Well,
if
you
somebody
better
says
bring out
to you-
your inner witch and
I
say,
know.
we are the
in Scotland, if somebody
Sprinkle
says to
magic.
you, "Oh, that's really good, that thing you did," you go, "Oh, that was rubbish. It was absolutely rubbish. Just
Oh.
stop looking at me. It's embarrassing." That's what we're
No.
like.
I
Let the
know more.
Americans
Thank
do
you.
it for you. Go vote right now on that.
Go vote.
It's
Go
in the history and
vote.
biography
Thank
section.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We really appreciate it, both Charlie and
Thank
Jen.
you.
Yeah, what a
And
nice
we'll put
night.
it up in stories too. We can put it up in the link in like on Instagram and all of that too.
Oh,
So
thank
Oh,
you.
cool.
Thank you.
thank
This has
you.
been so nice. We've loved it.
Oh, me too. This is just truly just filled my heart. I can't even tell you. I have been so looking forward to this conversation, and I
We
feel like
need to get back to Edinburgh to get to see some
Yeah.
more hosts.
I would
Yeah.
love to.
I'd like to give you a tour of St Andrews, because that's really spooky.
That is very
Yeah.
spooky.
Yeah.
That's like St Andrews is like Edinburgh, but by the sea, which makes it even more dramatic.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
That's
I
my
love some
son's
drama.
top university. He wants to go abroad, and he's like, "What
Oh.
about St. Andrews?"
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
Like,
he'd be fine there because there's a good amount of American people there, so it wouldn't be too much of a culture shock for him. Yeah.
There are, and every second shop claims to be the shop that Will and Kate, our king and queen to be, had their first date. Every coffee
Yeah.
shop.
Yeah. That's a
That's
load of rubbish.
hilarious.
Yeah.
well,
But
thank
anyway.
you all so much. What a great conversation. And it
thank
will
you.
be available. We're also going to be putting up a link to get the book. We've been putting up the links for the Instagram and the website and the shop. Go get it, go
Oh.
vote. And thank you all
Go
so
vote.
much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Thanks very
you.
much.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Bye.